Hi everyone, back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with the match preview for Newcastle United's next upcoming fixture, which happens to be an away trip to Turf Moor against Burnley. Burnley, we only played a few weeks ago then, just narrowly won 2-1 in that game. They nearly got back into it, to be fair, which was a little bit concerning. But we'll get stuck into the fixture in a minute, talk about our team, talk about how we're going to line up, which pretty much all of us can predict these days, given by the way the manager picks the teams. Talk a bit about Burnley as well, a little bit about the threats that they possess. But just before we do, a little reminder, if you haven't already, smash subscribe, come and help get us to the 13,000 subscriber mark. We're already on a good start. We're on 12,250, I think it is, which is a great start, to be fair. A really, really good start. So we want to be at 13,000 as quick as we possibly can be. But you can help us get there. It's all free content. If you want to be a member, feel free to smash that button and support the channel as well. But it's all free other than that. So what is up next for Newcastle United? What is Newcastle United got in store for as well? After the dismal Boxing Day performance against what can only be described as a raggy doll Manchester United 11 that was just so depressing in so many ways. It's caused so many issues as well. The fan base are at each other's throats. Half the fan base want the manager to go. The other half think you're stupid for asking the manager to go. It's maybe not 50-50, to be fair. It's maybe not as big as that. But there is a lot of discourse in the fan base right now with regards to the direction the team is going, the way we're playing, the lack of performances, the lack of results, more importantly, and the future of the manager. So what do Newcastle United need more than anything out of this win? What does Eddie Howe need anything more out of this game? Is a win. He needs a win. You know, we're on the bank of 3 games here, which really should be 9 points, which is Burnley, Palace, and Leeds. And only 9 points will do in these 3 games, in my opinion. And we're starting at Turf Moor against Burnley, managed by former Newcastle United midfielder Scott Parker. He splits opinion as well. A lot of the fan base used to call him passive back Parker. I thought he was a decent player, and he played for us, actually, to be fair. He grafted really hard, and he's probably one of the stylish managers on the touchline. All fairness, looks like page 65 of the next catalogue, doesn't he, his old Scotty Parker? But Scotty Parker's been up and down from the Premier League and the Championship on several occasions. And he just seems to always have relegation fodder teams. And I think it's pretty much going to be the same in this one with Burnley. But did it show St James's Park that have got a little bit of athleticism in their team? You know, they're not scared to have a go at you. They ran straight through us quite early on in the game, actually, and nearly scored, which worried the shit out of me in that fixture. So there won't be pushovers. But Newcastle United, for me, have to make some changes. And this is the lineup that I think Eddie Howe is going to go for. This isn't the lineup that I would go for. I'll talk about that in a second. I've already talked about it in a video before, but this is what I think Eddie Howe will do. I think it's time for Nick Pope to come back in goal. Now, Aaron Ramsdale has had some issues, it's safe to say, since he's come in between the sticks with Nick Pope's injury or drop of form or whatever it is. But Aaron Ramsdale, yes, he's really good with his feet. There's no doubt about that at all. But some of the goals that he's conceded, he's never kept a clean sheet since, has he? And some of the goals he's conceded, you've got to question whether he could have done better. So I think Nick Pope is going to come back. And I think Pope was always going to come back in because he's Eddie's number one. And that is the plan. I don't think Ramsdale was ever a plan for Eddie Howe. I think the fact that he couldn't get James Trafford, which may or may not be happening in January, we'll get into all the January links in a bit, really. But Nick Pope is always going to be Eddie's number one. I think he'll bring him back in against his former club. There's no doubt about that. And what does Nick Pope bring? Nick Pope brings probably stronger shot stopping abilities, better on crosses than Ramsdale's been, but he's not as good with his feet. And the way that Fabian Schär's passing the ball these days, that's a concern. But the back four, I think Eddie Howe will go for. Lewis Miley will continue at right back because Tino and Trippier, and we're not going to see either one of them two to the new year. It's still a bit of a waste of a player in terms of Lewis Miley, but in this game, he may have a bit more freedom to step into midfield. He couldn't really do that against Chelsea as he was marking Garnacho and even Neto when he went over there and the swap wings. And obviously against Manchester United, he had to deal with Cunha as well. So good players, very decent players. Against Burnley, he's probably not going to be that tested really against them in terms of their ability. You know, Kyle Walker maybe, you know, overlaps. He's on the left-hand side. You know, Perez and Larson aren't particularly at that quality. That's who played in their last game against Everton, where they got a great 0-0 draw, to be fair, but former Newcastle goalkeeper Dubravka was on fire. They kept him in that game. But I don't think it'll be the same problem for Lewis Miley that it's been in the last couple of games. So maybe we'll see him stepping in midfield and getting on the ball a little bit more. The centre-halves, they're kind of picking themselves at the moment, really. Malik Chow and Fabian Schär. I thought Fabian Schär was honking against Manchester United. I'd have no problem dropping him for Alex Murphy in this game. You've got to give the lad a chance sometime. And if you can't do it against 19th in the table, Burnley, then when are you going to do it? I think Alex Murphy showed some quality when he came on. I think he's good on the ball. He's big. He's strong. He was able to play left back as well. I'd give the kid a chance. I'd play him alongside Malik Chow, but Eddie Howe won't do that. He'll stick with Fabian Schär. And Fabian Schär better sure as shit play better than he did at Old Trafford, because some of his passing was suicidal. It really was. He put us in so much trouble. He was screaming at Lewis Hall, who was the best player of the park, in my opinion. He was making error after error after error. He was more Fabian Schär than Fabian Schär at Old Trafford. He better sort his shit out in this game, or we could be in real trouble once again. And I think Lewis Hall will continue at left back. He was man of the match at Old Trafford without a shadow of a doubt. He was brilliant. Stepping into midfield, skinning players, crashing one off the bar. He was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And I think Lewis Hall could be one of the match winners for us in this particular game. On the midfield three, I've changed it a little bit. I thought Jacob Ramsey was really poor against Manchester United. Doesn't deserve another chance for me. I know this is a game where they'll sit in a low block, no doubt about it, and we will have to come on to them and press them higher. And that's normally a game where you don't think Joe Litton's particularly the man for it, because he's not great on the ball. So you might think, oh, we'll put a Joe Willock or a Ramsey in. I think it's most likely that you'll put a Willock in, but I'm going to go with Joe Linton in my starting lineup. I think he'll go Joe Linton, Tonali in the 6, and Bruno Guimaraes on the other side. And that's, on paper supposed to be our best midfield three. But I think Joe Linton's massively regressing. He's 30 now. There's links to Saudi teams. I think this could be the last season we see Joe Linton in a black and white shirt. And he's not had the same impact in games that he's had previously, not against better opposition. He may do all right in this game because, a midfield of Cullen, and the lad's name I really struggle to pronounce. Is it Okochikawa? I think it is. I probably butchered that, Mark. I'll tell you in the comments. But, he should really power his way through both of those players, no doubt about it. But we'll have to wait and see which Joe Linton turns up. He looked like he was up for it against Manchester United, but he's so bad on the ball, it loses the ball. But Burnley don't possess a lot of players to really threaten you on the ball, so we might get away with it in this particular game. Now, the front three, I've gone for Visser through the middle. I want to see Johan Visser start a game. I want to see that pace. I want to see that movement. I want to see that dynamic running. I want to see us take a 2-goal, 3-goal lead in a first half and really dominate a team. And this could be the game that we could do this on. And we need a performance like that and a game like that. And I think Nick Vollmer looked really static, really stationary against Manchester United. Nobody got around him. I don't think this will be the game for him. This is a game I think we need to have runners in behind against the likes of their three centre-backs, which I think was Humphreys, Ekdal, and Laurent in the last game. So I think that Visser running between the lines of those players will be the better option for us. He should have started him in Old Trafford, in my opinion. Should start him here. And he'll continue Anthony Gordon, I think, on the left. And I think he'll bring in Harvey Barnes on the right. Now, Barnes brings goals. He brings energy, brings assists. This is the kind of game where Harvey Barnes could absolutely cause chaos and terrorize Burnley's back three. I really think he could. And I think he's got to start Visser and Barnes in this game. I would rather have Barnes on the left personally and drop Anthony Gordon, because I don't think he's been anywhere near as good. 45 minutes against Chelsea and 10, 12 minutes against Manchester United doesn't warrant a start for me personally, but it will do for Eddie Howe. So that's the Newcastle team that I think Eddie Howe will line up with. It was up to me. I would try the thing that we're all crying out for. I would try Nick Vollmer in a false 9 or a withdrawn striker role, number 10, with Visser in front of him. That's what I would do. And I'll have Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes in a double pivot of a midfield behind him. That's what I would try, because if you're not going to try it against Burnley, when the fuck are you going to try it, Eddie? And we need to try something different. We need to break away from this rigid 4-3-3 that he consistently plays. That's what I would rather he did, or even go to 3 at the back with wing backs and then have Lewis Miley in the midfield to try and get on the ball and make things happen. But I don't think he'll do either. I think he'll stick to what he knows and what he wants and what he likes, and that's his 4-3-3. And that's the formation that I think he'll play. And that's the team that I think he'll line up with. But going on to the opposition, as I say, looking at their kind of the way they lined up in the last game. I'm just trying to see if there's any team news. I'm recording this one quite early, so there's probably not a great deal of team news in all fairness. Let's just see if we can find any early team news. Maybe look at some of their injuries potentially. But the Burnley haven't been great this season. They're quite plucky, they work hard and they try to stay in games, but I just don't think that they're they're destined for the Premier League for the long haul, really. I just don't think they are. They leave too many gaps. They're quite naive at times, and a lot of teams pick them off. And I think that's exactly what will happen in this game in particular. I just don't think that they're going to be anywhere near good enough to keep Newcastle United at bay. But it depends what Newcastle United turn up. It really, really does. But Eddie Howe needs a performance from his players, and he needs them to show up, and he needs them. He really does need them to do something. He really, really does. And I just don't think that the players are going to let them down to that point where they don't get a result in this game. I just can't see it. So in the last game against Everton, when they drew 0-0, so injuries-wise, Hannibal was out injured. Transavi was out injured. I think that's a long-term injury. Lyle Foster is out at the African Cup of Nations. Connor Roberts was out injured. Amdouni? He was out injured as well. Jordan Bayer was out injured. So these guys might still be injured in terms of the lineup that they were playing. But in terms of the way they're set up, as I say, they're set up as a kind of a 3-4-3 formation. That had Broja through the middle. That had Edwards and Lawson either side of him. That had Perez, Josh Cullen, Akachakua, as he's called. Fucking God knows. I've no idea. Sorry, mate. I don't really butcher your name. Mark is better than me. They're number 8. That'll do you. Kyle Walker, Laurent, Ekdal, and Humphries. Now, Kyle Walker still has a bit of pace, but, he's nowhere near the player that he was. And Dubravka was the man of the match in the last game against Everton, who are normally quite shot shy. So Newcastle United should really, on paper, win this game. But again, you just don't know what Newcastle are going to show up. You really, really don't. But this is going to be a big test for me, because these 3 games come up at 9 points that Newcastle should realistically get. I mean, Palace is a difficult one. Depends what Palace shows up, because Palace can really be a good side on the day. But Newcastle should be getting 9 points out of the next 3 games, starting with this one. So for me, I'm going to predict that Newcastle United win this game 2-0. I'm not confident to predict a 3 or a 4-0. I'm going to go for a 2-0 win and a clean sheet for Nick Pope on his return to Turf Moor. And that's a good confidence booster for Newcastle. As long as we play well and we control the game and we get a couple of goals and we get in front of this game and boss this game, hold on to a lead, insert our dominance on them, I think we can get this win. And it's the first one out of 3. They need to target the 3 wins to get themselves back up the table, back up in a position where we expect to be for a club like us. We expect to be for a club that spent over 200 million quid on players in the summer transfer market. We expect to be there with Italian internationals, Brazilian internationals, England internationals playing for us. And a manager who everybody thinks is one of the best young managers in Europe. People even call him elite. He's not an elite manager. I've done a video about that a long time ago. I've never thought he's an elite manager. I thought he's a very good manager. But at the moment, he's a manager going through a very difficult time. And a lot of the problems that are happening for Eddie Howe are all his own doing, his own stubbornness, his own inability to change things, to look at things through a different prism and think, right, I keep doing this and it's not working. Why don't I try that? Or why don't I try that? And that's what the manager needs to do. That's what some of the best managers in the game have done. They've changed things. They've been fluid. They've changed formations. They've looked to do different things, implement different tactics in different moments of games. The best that there is, Ferguson's, the Wengers, the Mourinho's, the Guardiolas, the Klopps, the Ancelottis, all those managers, they've all had to change the way and the style that they've managed and played throughout their careers. And Eddie Howe's at a real sliding door moment here as a manager. A lot of the problems that we have at this football club, you go back and look at the old Bournemouth problems, it was exactly the same problems. He had his favourites, ran players into the ground, there was too many injuries, the signings weren't quite good, they couldn't break down low blocking sides. Go back and look. That's the problem that Bournemouth had as well. So Eddie Howe hasn't learned from those mistakes, despite the fact we all thought he'd evolved as a manager. But this is a huge game for Eddie Howe and a huge game for Newcastle United. And if these players are still playing for this manager, they owe him a performance and us a performance and themselves a performance as well, because the last few games in particular, the first half against Chelsea aside, have been really shit, and they really need to start getting some wins on the board and getting up this table. The league is still very close. 2 or 3 wins can get you back to where you want to be. And I think Newcastle will get the points at Turf Moor. I'm going 2-0. And let us know in the comments below what you guys think about the lineup, what you think about Burnley. Do you think they're going to be more of a threat than I'm giving them any credit for? I just think that we saw enough at St James's Park. I've seen enough through the season. I think that Newcastle should really be able to go at these teams, but they will sit in that low block and they will frustrate, and we don't have the creativity to break down that low block, and that's a concern for me. But let us know in the comments below whether you think we are going to win this game. What do you think the score is going to be? What do you think about the line? Do you think Eddie will go with that? Do you think he'll go with something different? What would you do if you were a manager? What would you change in terms of the lineup to try and get something different out of this side, rather than just the same old fucking 4-3-3 week in, week out that Eddie Howe does? Always keen to hear your comments. Keep it above the belt. Don't be a prick or you'll get the flick. You've seen that before in the lives in particular, when you get a few arseholes stumbling in, pissed up. you know, mouthing off. When I say pissed up on content, mouthing off. Flick, off you go. Got no time for that shit anymore. That's why I don't bother on X anymore, because it's a toilet. But thanks for watching, guys. Remember to like and subscribe. I'll be back with a live post-match analysis of this game Tuesday night. It's a 7:30 kickoff, so we'll be back on probably after 10, I'd imagine. And fingers crossed, Newcastle have got the result needed and some real confidence back, not just in the players, but in the manager too. Thanks for watching. Have a belter. I'll see you later.
Howe's heroes celebrate. They have done it.